This week on Jersey Matters, the Delta variant is sending children to the hospital. We talk with Dr. Martin Topiel, the head of infectious diseases at Virtua Health. A New Jersey veteran wounded in the war in Afghanistan says the withdrawal from Afghanistan is embarrassing. And the great mask debate. What is going to happen when schools open this fall? And an expert encourages us all to squish a spotted lanternfly on site. Hello and welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. The Delta variant, the highly infectious strain of COVID-19, is causing a rise in cases and hospitalizations around the country and in New Jersey. What is especially concerning is the rise in cases in children. For more on the Delta variant and children, we talk to Dr. Martin Topiel, infectious disease specialist at Virtua Health. Hi, doctor. Thank you so much for doing this. Children and COVID-19 are making headlines across the country. Let's start off by getting some of the numbers or some of the statistics or the threat of COVID-19 for children. What are we seeing?
Well, we're still accumulating numbers. We're certainly seeing different geographic pockets in the country. Some have more prevalence than others. So we know in the South and areas in Florida, Louisiana, they've had a much larger amount of cases. But yet in San Francisco, there have been virtually no admissions there, and that's been reported recently. So it's unclear why these geographic variations are going on. What we can say is prior to this summer, there have been 340 deaths in children. So even though people have made it out to be that this wasn't really a problem for children, it has been. And certainly when it's your individual family child, that one person is all that means to you. So pediatric illness is a big thing. We weren't prepared for this. We didn't know it existed. And we certainly have tremendous concerns with the school year coming up.
Yeah, I looked at some of the numbers and I understand why you didn't give them because it is a moving target. But at one point, I think it was around August 1st, they were saying that 84,000 children had gotten the Delta variant and that it was up almost 80% from the week before. And so I haven't followed it from there, but you can imagine that the Delta variant among children is spreading rather quickly. The question is, what do we do about it?
Right. And to go back to that also, we know that there's concerns about multi-inflammatory syndrome in children. We also have concerns about the implications of the long haulers. Particularly in kids, what are the long-term effects of even mild illness? And that's something we don't have available to us. What do we do about it? I think the CDC has come out with appropriate recommendations. We have a vulnerable population below the age of 12. They're not vaccinated at all. Above the age of 12, we're certainly nowhere near a large immune population. So I think the CDC has put out appropriate recommendations that there be masking in the schools among teachers, students, people who go inside. And while we may be thinking about that in terms of the children, let's remember the children come home to their grandparents, their grandmother, their immunocompromised parents. Everybody's at risk with that. It's not.
It can still be asymptomatic, right? That's
right.
Happening.
Right. What's so bothersome about the Delta variant is transmission can occur both in unvaccinated and the vaccinated when asymptomatic. The transmission still happens. And so that's why masking is so important.
Where are we now with the vaccine for children between the ages of 5 and 12? I know Pfizer came out and said that they were ready, but I guess it's not getting FDA approval for a while, and that's getting pushed back and back and back.
Yeah, it's so difficult. And I think they're still expanding the size of the study between 5 and 12. So they're not ready yet to present that. The word I hear is that maybe in 3 months that may appear, but they want to accumulate some numbers yet.
So it's not going to be ready for September. It's not going to be ready for the beginning of the school.
It's not going to be ready for September. And I think what we have to do as a collective population is build that safety bubble so that our schools, our teachers, our population is safe. And I think what we have to do is promote vaccination to children, sort of get rid of that idea that all the children are safe and nothing happens to them. We need to protect them, and we need to protect their families.
So when it comes to the vaccine, do you think it should be mandatory for children?
Yeah. Well,
when it's available?
That's, of course, that's a very tough question. I would love to see it, if it's mandatory for children, it has to be mandatory for adults. So I think it's hard to say it's mandatory all encompassing children. We can build that bubble without it. We really need to promote the hell out of it. We really need to show the safety figures. This is the safest vaccine that's ever been produced. We've never had anything that's been able to show a safety profile like this vaccine has with such high numbers.
Do you see a point where we might have to go virtual again?
I think there's a decent possibility of that. The school is going to be a very disruptive situation. Let's remember, last year, there was very little school attendance. If we don't have good masking with this Delta variant, with the transmission capabilities, it's going to be a very disruptive situation. And there's going to have to probably be a fallback plan in order to have remote capabilities. I find it hard to believe that we'll be able to do a school year 100%. And that's knowing just Delta. We don't know what might be coming down the pike otherwise. So we really need to have all sorts of preparations for that.
Sir, thank you so much for your time. It was valuable information. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Martin Topiel, infectious disease specialist at Virtua Health. Still to come on Jersey Matters, a New Jersey veteran who was wounded in Afghanistan reacts to the chaos he's watching on TV as we withdraw from that country. That's next. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. As we all watch the chaos and confusion surrounding the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan, just imagine what it must be like to be a veteran of that war, watching all this in real time. We talk with one such officer who was wounded in Afghanistan and now is a police officer in Bloomfield Township, Jeff Keck. Hi, Jeff. Thanks so much for doing this. And it goes without saying, although I have to say it, thank you so much for your service and what you did in Afghanistan. Can you talk about your service for a second and your time in Afghanistan?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, and thanks again for having me. I served in the 178th Airborne in Afghanistan in 2012, 2013. I was wounded by a pretty large truck bomb that blew up outside the base I was on. Initially, I was hurt, but I was kind of fine, walked it off kind of, and then, later on, the effects of that started messing with me. So like very high blood pressure, lost balance, wound up in the hospital. I had to get a C427 replaced in my neck, lost some teeth, a couple of brain bleeds. So after about 19 months, here I am.
We wanted to talk to you because of the events in Afghanistan now. You've watched everything unfolding. What are your thoughts?
First, I'd say I'm disgusted and ashamed, truthfully. The pullout, the way that happened, leaving all that equipment, leaving our allies, leaving our, citizens, and not to mention those people that helped us, just pulled out and left them naked. not to mention that now this is, instead of leaving with honor, this is going to be basically a free state for terrorism. So what's the long lasting effects of this? Is the next generation going to have to go fight my war? What did I spend 19 months in the hospital for? What did my friends not make it home for?
Yeah, I think there is some confusion about what everybody is upset about and what I assume that you're upset about, but you can speak for yourself, as you just said. There is all this talk about we made so many mistakes in the past. It was time to get out. I don't know why people didn't want to get out. It seems to me that most people are saying, no, we should have get out. It's just getting out the right way. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that how you feel?
Yes, absolutely. That's how I feel. Again, nobody wants to see the end of a war more than anybody who's ever fought one. Of course I wanted it to end. Of course I wanted guys to come home. But what was the cost of that? We have strategic air bases like places like Bagram. We were able to, keep bad actors in that region on their toes. Now that's gone. Not to mention how we pulled out, we left our allies naked. So in the future, do you think that our allies are going to have any confidence in us backing them? Or if we need our allies, what are they going to do for us?
I want to point out that we're recording this on a Thursday, and what's happening in Afghanistan changes so quickly. I think it's important to point that out. But right now, there are reports of as many as 15,000 Americans left behind.
Yes,
in Afghanistan. And
I've heard that report.
Yeah, and now they're sending up to 7,000 more men. They pulled out 2,500. They're sending back 7,000 to make up for this. I know it's part of your DNA when you serve that you leave no one behind. And so as you're looking at this, as you're looking as men having to go over again into this situation to try to get people out, I already asked you how you felt about what you're watching on TV, but specifically about that mission that maybe didn't have to happen had they done it the right way. How do you respond to that?
No, absolutely. That is what it is, right? So I think that's a little far reaching as opposed to coming out the right way. Why these people, why we had to send guys back? If we just left our people in place in the first place, that's what they're there for. They're there for security. So you pull them out, leave Americans naked, and then you have to send them back again. What kind of message does that show across the world? It shows weakness. It shows incompetence.
What is your hope from here on out? I mean, here we are. We're in the middle of this now. It's going to end somehow. What lessons should we learn from this?
It would almost be like we don't learn lessons from anything. From Vietnam and past. It almost seems like the same mistakes repeated over and over again. I don't know what to say about learning from it. And I'm not a fearful person, right? But what I would say, this is what I'm concerned about, is what the effects are going to be on our next generation.
I do appreciate you talking with me today. There's nothing at all that you or any of the men and women that served should be embarrassed about. This does not dishonor your service. What happened? It only dishonors the people that are taking part in this right now. And so thank you so much. I think that that's the worst part for me, is that I think that there are some people out there that feel less about what they did, and they shouldn't. That you served bravely and you sacrificed, and you're back here now. This has little to do with you. And I hope you understand that.
No, absolutely. I do, but the way I see that, is I'm proud of my service. The end and the closing in this, it can't help but bring a humiliation on us for this. If that makes sense. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for the time. And again, thanks for serving and for your sacrifice. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Jeff Keck, veteran of the war in Afghanistan. Still to come on Jersey Matters.
17 months into the pandemic, we've become familiarized with COVID-19, the Delta variant, and next we'll tell you about a new concern that you may not be aware of. Coming up next on Jersey Matters.
The New Jersey Marathon has been canceled for the second year in a row after a spike in COVID-19 cases. Organizers announced Monday that the 26.2-mile race scheduled for mid-October will not be taking place. Long Branch made the decision not to allow large events this fall. Runners who signed up for the race will be offered a partial refund or credit to another race. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. As you know, there's been a spike in COVID-19 cases because of the Delta variant, both in New Jersey and across the country. But as Jersey Matters' Kimberly Kravitz reports, there are people in New Jersey still suffering from lingering symptoms from the original virus. Kimberly.
Brain fog, shortness of breath, or sudden hair loss. If you are experiencing any of these symptoms post-COVID, you may be considered a long hauler, someone who is battling long COVID.
I'm just not the same person. I'm not.
62-year-old Randy Bett was diagnosed with COVID-19 just 9 days after receiving her first Moderna shot.
9 days after my first vaccination, I have a raging fever. I was on oxygen for days, and I was very sick, very, very sick.
Randy was hospitalized for 6 days and fully recovered from COVID, but it wasn't until 4 months later that she noticed these lingering symptoms develop.
I'm getting these bulging veins that I never had in my legs. My hands go numb. I developed arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, it just doesn't stop. I mean, I come home from going out for an hour or two, and I need a 3-hour nap. Kimberly, I wash my hair every night or every morning, and it just comes out in clumps.
Dr. Edward Liu, Chief of Infectious Diseases at Jersey Shore University Medical Center, tells me that long COVID doesn't discriminate and could happen to anyone.
It affects any age group. I've seen numbers from 10 to even 50%, but I think it's closer to 10 to 20% of people can have the long hauler symptoms.
So for those who are unvaccinated, are they more likely to see these symptoms as opposed to someone that is vaccinated?
I think that unvaccinated people are more likely to have long COVID symptoms than the vaccinated.
The symptoms such as fatigue, shortness of breath, and muscular pain mimic many of the same as Lyme disease, and that's according to Dr. Alkett of Johns Hopkins University.
It was striking when I first saw the display of the symptoms in the COVID long haulers. They were displayed on a graph where each line in the graph was one of the symptoms, and they formed kind of a pattern. And when you take that pattern in the COVID long haulers and put it next to the pattern of the Lyme persistent symptom group, they're almost identical. It almost makes like a butterfly of symmetry of the distribution of the symptoms.
Even despite the pain and other changes her body is going through, Randy tells me that the one that makes her most discouraged.
The shortness of patience is probably the most disturbing, because I was always I would listen. I was always a good listener, very good listener. And I just lose my patience. COVID has affected me emotionally, physically, and financially, as it has my entire family. My son and my husband both have PTSD because they watched me.
So if you or someone you know are still battling symptoms of long COVID, there are options available for you, including the Hackensack Meridian Health COVID Recovery Center. Reporting from Jersey Shore University Medical Center in Neptune, for Jersey Matters, I'm Kimberly Kravitz.
Thank you, Kimberly. Next on Jersey Matters.
A scientific research institution in New Jersey is hard at work to further our understanding of the Delta variant of COVID-19. More on that story next.
A big congratulations to the Toms River East Little League team for once again making it to the Little League World Series. and to the Robbinsville Little League team for making it to the Softball World Series. You all make New Jersey very proud. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. Hackensack Meridian Health's scientific laboratory in New Jersey is working right now on the COVID-19 virus. Jersey Matters' Jennifer Marin was at the lab and says they're working overtime on understanding the virus, its variants, and how to beat it. Jennifer.
Larry, researchers here at the Center for Discovery and Innovation are hard at work, and they tell me that in the last few weeks, more than 90% of the patient swabs are testing positive for the Delta variant. Researchers at the Center for Discovery and Innovation are working to better understand the Delta variant of COVID-19.
It's at least twice as infectious as the original virus that originated at the beginning of the pandemic in China. Consequently, it's considered to be almost as infectious as chickenpox.
The research lab is part of the Hackensack Meridian Hospital System. Elizabeth Titova, a clinical research coordinator at the CDI, is testing patient swabs to determine which variant is present. The Alpha or UK variant, which was once the dominant variant, is now barely being detected.
Delta is up and coming all over these swabs. We haven't tested these swabs specifically yet, but I'm almost sure that upwards of 90% of them will be Delta. So it is extremely prevalent.
Barry Kreisworth, one of the lead scientists at the research lab, says SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, is constantly changing to survive.
What you have is now a virus that is able to find those unvaccinated and those children who are not vaccinated.
Kreisworth says there's only one way to overcome the Delta variant.
If you get vaccinated, we'll be able to reduce the number of the Delta variant and eventually just dilute it out. The problem is, as long as we have unvaccinated people and unfortunately children who are under the age to get vaccinated, we're still going to have places where the virus can go.
Still, studies have shown some breakthrough cases in which vaccinated people are contracting the variant.
The good news is that even in our breakthrough cases, most people are with very little serious illness, and most of them go home.
He adds that vaccinated people who develop complications usually have underlying conditions, some of which they may not even know about.
The terrible part about COVID for the last 2 years is that a lot of people have not gotten routine examinations, routine physicals.
As for the alarming rise in COVID cases in children.
Children are unfortunately the victim in this case because they have no choice. We need to get as many adults vaccinated to dilute the chances of the children getting infected.
In recent weeks, we've heard of yet another variant, Lambda. Scientists say it appears to be less transmittable than Delta, but there's another concern.
It's supposedly been shown in a few studies to be possibly more resistant to vaccines, so it would probably not be a good thing if it spread.
So far, only one Lambda sample has been collected at the CDI back in April. The leading scientist at the center says the next cause for concern is the flu season. He stresses that the flu and COVID-19 don't have a relationship and that it's important to receive both vaccines to be as protected as possible. For now, reporting in Nutley, for Jersey Matters, I'm Jennifer Marin.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. The race for Bergen County Clerk has never gotten this much media attention, and it's all because Bridget Kelly won the Republican nomination. Kelly is the former Deputy Chief of Staff to Governor Chris Christie, and she was involved in Bridgegate. We talked with her last week. And now we give equal time to the man that Kelly is trying to unseat, the current clerk of Bergen County, Democrat John Hogan. Mr. Hogan, thanks so much for doing this. Did you ever think that the Bergen County clerk election would get this much attention?
Never in my lifetime, but I'm glad because it gives us a chance to highlight many of the accomplishments that we've been able to carry out during the past 10 years.
Well, that's wonderful. I do want to get into that. first, I want to talk about your announcement that you were running for re-election, because of course, I think a lot of people know, and if they don't, Bridget Kelly is running against you. She got the Republican nomination. She is the same Bridget Kelly that was convicted in the Bridgegate traffic jam that the Christie administration caused when they shut down lanes at the George Washington Bridge, and then her conviction was overturned. You had your announcement speech at the George Washington Bridge.
Yes.
And you called her candidacy embarrassing. You called her deplorable.
Yes.
She came back at that and said that she was surprised, as you said a moment ago, you got to get a chance to talk about your record. She said, isn't it surprising that he attacked me and didn't talk about his record because he doesn't have a record to run on? Your response?
Well, half of my presentation wasn't covered by the media that day, and that included my record. Half of my prepared script, you could see, covered my record. And of course, I spoke about my record, and people know my record. I have a solid record. I always did the right thing for the people I served. I never closed the bridge. I never thought of doing anything that devious in my life. It was the biggest scandal that ever hit Bergen County.
She says she did nothing wrong. I interviewed her last week. She says she did nothing wrong. The Supreme Court overturned her conviction. It was others that she wishes would be implicated in this.
She's trying to rewrite history. You know, if you look at the documents, you could, simple Google can tell you it. On July 21st, the Associated Press wrote an article, and it says former Bridgegate villain seeks political resurrection. That's the Associated Press saying it. She got off on a technicality. The wrong laws were applied to her by the prosecutors at the time. But Justice Kagan said that there were actually criminal acts that were committed. Unfortunately, she was charged with the wrong acts, and she was weeks away, days away from going to prison. And, you know, everyone should have a chance to rebuild their life. But I don't think that she feels entitled. She thinks that because she always had a paid political job. I worked in the private sector. She always had a paid political job. She feels entitled that she should get another political job. And this was what was offered to her. She's trying to rewrite history, and she's writing a book in the meantime.
Now, I will, admittedly, I set you up for that answer, but you did attack her on your own. And you would think, you've been in office now, what, 11 years?
10 years.
10 years. And that 10 years, you've been challenged in the past. I would imagine that the challengers that you've had in a Democratic county, you've been able to dispose of easily. Are you concerned about her because of her name recognition and how well she did in the Republican primary?
I think she has negative name recognition. I think Republicans are going to vote for Republicans in a primary. Democrats are going to vote for Democrats. I did well in the primary from the Democratic turnout. I had a challenger. She didn't have a challenger.
Maybe we should back up and explain what a county clerk does. The position is pretty important.
The county clerk has been around before George Washington. It was pretty much set up by the King of England because someone had to keep track of all the land records. And that's essential that someone should know that if they're running for the office. There's 4 divisions. One is the counter division, which handles passports, notary publics, and many of the other transactions like that. There's an elections division. We handle a big portion of the election process, but not all of it. We have a land records management division where all the deeds and mortgages, the paper transactions from years past wind up for title searchers to participate in. And then we have a registry division where all the land transactions pass through so that if someone pays off their mortgage, that comes to our registry division.
Why don't you give me a couple of things that you're running on and you're proudest of accomplishing?
The biggest thing is that we're running this office at the same cost that it was 30 years ago. We've reduced spending, we've increased technology, we've made it simpler for people to utilize the services of our office right from their home computer. I can tell you election results when I first came into office, we heard that they took weeks because there weren't enough of election counter devices. So we've gotten all that technology up and running, and we want to keep it that way. We don't want to go back to running it like it was the last century. We've kept the political aspects out of the office. I made a promise that I would cut elections printing costs by $200,000 a year. I kept that promise. That's now a $2 million savings. We carried out elections during Hurricane Sandy and during the pandemic of last year. There's a lot of good stuff happening in the county clerk's office.
Mr. Hogan, thank you so much for your time. Bergen County Clerk John Hogan. Still to come on Jersey Matters, advice on how to deal with the dreaded spotted lanternfly. Next. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. Several counties in New Jersey are under quarantine because of this, the spotted lanternfly. Doug O'Malley, Executive Director of Environment New Jersey, tells us what this all means. As always, thanks for joining us today. The topic of the season right now is the spotted lanternfly. What exactly does it mean that 8 counties are quarantined? What does that mean for people living there?
Sure. So just a quick explanation, Larry. If folks aren't familiar with the spotted lanternfly, just in case you've been in your house for the last 18 months, essentially the spotted lanternfly is a small bug, about 1 inch of size. It now is a striking color because it's red with black specks. And we're seeing them everywhere across the state. And so whether you're in Salem or Gloucester or Camden or Burlington or up to Mercer and Hunter and Warren and even Somerset, a little inland, those counties have some of the highest numbers of spotted lanternflies. And the Department of Agriculture has put in place a quarantine. And specifically what that means is that the bugs are not going to pay attention to that, but spotted lanternflies, unfortunately, are hitchhikers. They first came to this country in 2014. They're an invasive species. They're originally from China and India and Vietnam. And we first saw them in New Jersey in 2018. And over the course of the last 3 years, they've spread nearly everywhere across the state. And that's because they're hitchhikers. And so this might be a little counterintuitive because we're used to seeing spotted lanternflies on trees, but they will attach themselves to cars or really any other vehicle, especially on the kind of undercarriage. And that's how they're being transported across the state. So, really what the Department of Agriculture is saying is, look, you can still travel, but make sure that you're not bringing spotted lanternflies with you if you're traveling through these counties. And that's especially true if you're transporting plants or landscaping materials.
Yeah, that was incredibly detailed, but I think maybe we should talk about why they're so hated, what they do, what kind of damage they can do.
Yeah, so this really is the summer of the bad bug, right? We have the cicadas, we have an increase of ticks, out in the Pacific Northwest. We have the murder hornets. The reason why spotted lanternflies are probably the most visible threat is because not only they're an invasive species, not only are they kind of taking over, but they're really bad news for a wide variety of plant species, especially our trees and especially grapevines. The best way to think of a spotted lanternfly is essentially it's a vampire for trees with wings, because when you see those infestations, and they can get into the thousands on some trees, they are literally sucking the sap out of trees. They're weakening the trees, and certainly for grapevines, they're making those trees and grapevines much less likely to be able to make it through the winter.
And they're difficult to kill, right?
Yeah, no. Anyone who's kind of tried to kill them, right? Sometimes you get them right on the first try, but they're mobile, they're fast. Obviously, we encourage everyone to do their part and try to squish as many spotted lanternflies as possible. But especially for larger infestations, it's harder to squash 1,000 spotted lanternflies.
It seems like nothing works. And if something did work, we probably wouldn't have this problem anymore. Do you know of anything they're doing right now? Or do you know something that works aside from just squishing them?
Exactly. Yeah. So the question is, other than having a massive squish patrol, what actually works to, what actually works to keep their population low and ultimately get rid of it? And honestly, we're still in the process of figuring out how to fully control the population. But the Department of Agriculture has been working on this for 3 years. And so they have recommended a certain number of naturally occurring pesticides like neem oil, which actually comes from a neem tree and can be bought over the counter. The traps, that does work. That requires a kind of a high degree of work to make that happen. I think the most promising work we've seen is through the Department of Agriculture. They worked on a suppression effort that just last year on more than 20,000 acres and across 600 properties in the quarantine counties.
Well, you are an encyclopedia when it comes to wildlife in New Jersey and the environment in New Jersey. Thanks so much for sharing the information with us. Doug O'Malley, Executive Director, Environment New Jersey. Still to come on Jersey Matters.
I'm Phil Andrews, and coming up on Jersey Matters, we'll tell you why some Garden State parents are not happy with Governor Murphy's mask mandate for their school children.
Hi everybody, welcome to your Jersey Matters Weather Minute. I'm Nor'easter Nick here to tell you that we are heading into the heart of hurricane season. We are right here. Within the next couple of weeks, we are going to find ourselves in that position where we historically see the maximum number of not only named storms, but hurricanes as well. After September 10th, that activity starts to dwindle a little bit and we can breathe a sigh of relief. But hurricane season runs from June 1st all the way through the end of November. So we can and we do get impacted by storms all the way through the end of the season. So we watch 3 distinct tracks this time of the year. We start finding these long track systems that come off the west coast of Africa, and they have differing outcomes. One potential track goes right through the Caribbean, south of the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico into Mexico. We actually saw that recently with Tropical Storm Grace. Another track goes right towards Florida. And finally, as is evident by Henri, it's possible to go right up the coast. Stay tuned for more updates.
Hi, Jersey Matters!
That is a Girl Scout troop from Lacey Township that put together this week's Jersey Jaunt in honor of the 150th anniversary of Lacey.
This township was founded the same time that the Yellowstone National Park.
Lacey's the best kept secret in any part of New Jersey.
Lacey Township is celebrating its 150th anniversary this year. It is our sesquicentennial.
People have come together in amazing ways. I mean, when you look at Lacey Township as a whole, when people need something, they come together and they give.
It's a great, larger small town. We have the Pine Barrens to the west and we have the Bay and Ocean to the east, so our population density is relatively small.
And you take a look at the historical elements. We're standing in Enos Park right now. And did you know that this used to be an airfield for Captain Zinn back in the 1950s? Well, you take a look at Lacey Road and that being built basically to carry bog iron down to the Forked River. You take a look around and you just see the richness and the history here. It's just a great place to live, and I can't really imagine living anywhere else.
You always come back to, what feels like home and where you feel safe and happy. And Lacey Township does that for me.
I'm really grateful for the town and everything that they've given to me. I'll never be able to repay the town for how great they've been to me. Never.
Lacey means to me community. I've lived here my whole life. This is my home, the only place I ever want to be.
Very nice job, girls. That was put together by Girl Scout Troop 249 in Lacey Township. And many of those girls are going to have to wear masks when they go back to school in the fall. Jersey Matters' Phil Andrews says the battle lines have been drawn. Phil.
Well, Larry, as you know, school mask mandates have become a big issue over the last month or so. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of Garden State parents who are just not happy about it.
Prior to leaving for his recent family vacation to Italy, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy made this announcement.
All students, educators, staff, and visitors will be required to wear masks inside of school buildings, regardless of vaccination status, for the start of the 2021-2022 academic year.
And that news was not welcomed by many Garden State parents. As a matter of fact, some have even filed a lawsuit against the governor, as well as the commissioners of health and education.
The lawsuit asserts that these orders violate the First Amendment rights to speech and association and privacy of New Jersey school children. The orders actually limit the ability to communicate in many significant ways. We all know that nonverbal communication is fundamental to human speech. Children especially are developing their communication skills. They're first learning what these nonverbal cues are. We know that most communication is not really the words used, but the gestures, the smile, the frown, the facial expressions, which are fundamental. In fact, in the law, we require juries to see a witness precisely because facial expressions are so important. Young children especially are first developing this knowledge. For children to be masked all day and to have their teachers masked all day prevents basic communication developing between children and between children and teachers and staff.
Meanwhile, in Ocean County this week, parents also voicing their complaints about the governor's mask mandate.
This is a very sad world that we're living in the sense that we as parents are losing our rights. I don't want to lose my rights as a parent. And nobody else in the government or anything else is going to come into my house and tell me how to raise my children. I don't agree with the mask mandates, and I feel like it should be a choice of the parents.
We don't believe that the state knows exactly what's going on in every county, and it should be up to the counties to determine their health department to determine what needs to be done as well. This needs to be a community, thing, not one person mandating everything, and that's basically where we're at right now.
By the way, this coming Tuesday, Mr. Buteau and some of his group will take part in a parent-teacher unity rally at the headquarters of the New Jersey Education Association in Trenton to continue their protest against masks in school.
Now, I'm certainly not trying to mask the issue, if you'll excuse the pun, but that lawsuit against Governor Murphy, similar lawsuits in other states have proven to be unsuccessful. In Toms River, for Jersey Matters, I'm Phil Andrews.
All right, thank you, Phil. My commentary is next. The situation in Afghanistan continues to deteriorate, with the Taliban now cutting off access to the Kabul airport, and as many as 15,000 Americans trapped in that country, with 7,000 troops going there to try to get them out. So it only makes sense that the president, after his first widely panned address to the nation, would try it again and address the nation about the crisis brought on by a poorly planned withdrawal.
The plan is for every adult to get a booster shot 8 months after you got your second shot.
Wait, what? Booster shots? Seriously? That may be the weakest attempt ever to change the subject and control the media narrative. And then he walked away and ignored all questions about the mess he created.
God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
President Biden taking no questions.
Yeah, no questions because he has no answers. And if he did answer, that would become the question, not booster shots. This is a sure sign of a White House in crisis. And no wonder, because the highly respected Reuters poll that happened to be polling during the withdrawal shows that the president's approval rating dropped 7 points in 3 days, from 53% on Friday before the withdrawal to 46% on Monday. 46% is the lowest approval rating for President Biden in the Reuters poll. Another poll, the Trafalgar poll, shows that 70% of Americans do not approve of the way President Biden handled the withdrawal, and that includes 48% of Democrats who disapprove. Even Democratic office holders in Washington have been turning on the president since the withdrawal. The most stinging comment came from Texas Democratic Congressman Vicente Gonzalez, who has been critical of the president anyway over the way he's been handling the border. On Afghanistan, Gonzalez said the situation in Afghanistan is another stain on the administration. Gonzalez is on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. They're going to be holding hearings on the Afghanistan debacle next week. Also on that committee is Massachusetts Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton.
We really missed the boat here. That's why I've been asking the administration, pleading with the administration for months to start this evacuation. Don't wait until the last minute. Just do the math. You can't do this in the last week. But they didn't heed that advice.
Several Democratic senators have also released statements saying they warned the Biden administration about a fast withdrawal, but were ignored. Democratic New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez, who is chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, put out a statement announcing hearings about Afghanistan next week, saying there were clear policy, execution, and intelligence failures. Our allies are also upset with the president for his "it wasn't my fault" speech, where he blamed the Afghan army.
The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight.
That excuse struck deep in the hearts of veterans of the Allied forces who fought side by side with the Afghan army in Afghanistan and watched as members of the Afghan army fought valiantly and died for their country's freedom. And that includes Tom Tugendhat, who is now a member of the British Parliament.
Because I was never prouder than when I was decorated by the 82nd Airborne after the capture of Musakala. It was a huge privilege to be recognized by such an extraordinary unit in combat. To see their commander-in-chief call into question the courage of men I fought with, to claim that they ran. It's shameful. Those who have never fought for the colors they fly should be careful about criticizing those who have.
It is shameful that we accuse the Afghan army, who took over on the front lines in 2014, suffering over 50,000 casualties, of running when we ran on them, leaving no support. The failure of the Biden administration to get Americans and allies out of Afghanistan on time has left the president isolated. This is an electronic billboard that was purchased and is on display in the president's home state of Delaware. And that reminds me, there is someone else who should share the blame in all of this. Us. Joe Biden spent most of his presidential campaign in the basement of his home in Wilmington, Delaware, and we still elected him. Is it any surprise that he's AWOL now during the Afghanistan crisis and hiding from us still? I'm Larry Menti. We'll talk again soon.
President Biden taking no questions.